At its heart, Christmas Carol is a scary story about ghosts. So I think it's important that we have a little look at the theme of fear and how fear runs through our story, and that is not always a bad thing. So just like everything every other time, I'm going to layer up my points of view, and I've color coded it so you can see where we're hitting all the parts on the mark scheme. So the first thing I'd need in my introduction is I would need to be establishing my conceptualized argument. Now, of course there's fear, of course it's scary. We need to, or the pressure is on us to say something a little bit more thoughtful than that. So I'd be saying, as I would with any question about Scrooge, I'd be getting on the dance floor straight away saying that Scrooge represents us. He is all of us. We can all be kinder, we can all be gentler, we can all be more selfless, we can all be less wealth focused. Now, we need to talk particularly about fear now, if this question's about fear, and I'll be talking about how that fear is what drives the change in Scrooge. It's the threat and the worry of the future that makes him change to be a better person, i.e. fear and worry is necessary for us to be better people. So the 4 points I'll be making, just like normal, I've got 4 points in chronological order. The first time he's properly scared is when he comes home on his own and he sees the door knocker looking like Jacob Marley, shuts the door, and the noise rattles through the house like thunder. And I would talk about how that initial fear is quite natural, quite manageable at that moment. Then I'd be talking about how when Marley turns up, he talks about how Scrooge feels the chilling influence of its deaf, cold eyes. So we've got Scrooge right. The first ghost that he sees, even though it's his old mate, he's scared of him. And we're going to talk about the effect of that and significance of that shortly. But then the ghost he's really scared of is the ghost of Christmas future. So I'm going to dedicate the second half of my essay to him. First of all, about him approaching slowly, gravely, and silently like mist. And then finally, the fear that Scrooge feels when the ghost of Christmas future shows him his death and shows him his lack of legacy. And in that paragraph, that's really key in my essay here, because that paragraph is where I'm showing the significance of the fear and why it was so important for Scrooge. So first one, through the house like thunder. So when we talk about through the house like thunder, straight away, let's talk about thunder. Thunder is dangerous, it's a fearful weather, it makes us feel uncomfortable. We don't like being in thunder and lightning storms. But it's low level fear. Like, we've all lived through a thunder and lightning storm, we've all come out the other side. It's quite natural. So that would reflect how this fear is natural, it's overcomable, it's not something we should be stressing ourselves out. Now that's a really basic point, but this is another one of Dickens's really clever quotes where he's operating on two levels, because yes, thunder's scary, but also thunder comes with light. Light is always a symbol of hope and guidance. So this is showing that this initial fear, this arrival of Jacob Marley, that's the first step of guidance that Scrooge needs to be a better person. We can also talk about how storms pass. No storm lasts forever, and so just like the storm will pass, the fear will also pass. And then the storms, when they rain heavily down onto our ground, it leaves something brighter, greener, more energetic, more beautiful. And that's exactly what will happen with Scrooge. His fear will pass, and what will be left is a better version of himself. I'd also bring in some contextual point here that the reason why he's so damn scared is because he's in a massive great big house all on his own. And the reason why he's in a massive great big house all on his own is because he's followed the Victorian social expectation to use your home as a status symbol. And he's chosen Marley's massive great big home because it shows he's got wealth. It shows that he's a big man in town. But obviously him being in this massive great big house all on his own, that's scaring the bejesus out of him, because he's got no one there for company, he's got no one there to reassure him, and he's therefore at the mercy of his own fears and anxieties. We're also talking about the alliterative here, through the house like thunder. And there's a few things you could say, but for me, an alliteration at any point is about creating an echo, about creating a sound. And these echoing sounds across this sentence reflect that echoing sound of the thunder through the house. And if we've got this idea of the thunder rattling on and the alliteration rattling on, well, that would show that his fear is also rattling on, and the fear is returning and returning and returning and is not going away. Throughout the rest of our story from this point on, Scrooge gets more and more and more scared. Right, so then Jacob Marley turns up, and I have this quote here now: the chilling influence of its deaf, cold eyes. Now, we've got chilling and cold, and this is the second of 3 quotes I would use here that are to do with the weather. Now, the fact the weather is a constant all the way through Scrooge's fear shows that Scrooge's fear will also be just as constant as the weather. There's never been a day in the history of humanity that hasn't had weather. There will never be a day where Scrooge is not afraid and worried of the consequences of the man he is becoming. The weather is also unpredictable. We don't know for sure what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's just like Scrooge's handling of his fears. He bounces from anxiety to worry to concern in so many different flashpoints of his life when he sees them. And it becomes increasingly unpredictable. And that's scary. We don't like the unpredictable. We don't like the unknown. I'd also look at this deaf cold. Dickens straight away links fear to death right from the outset. So it's foreshadowing, even at this stage, that it's Scrooge's death that terrifies him most of all, and we see that later on. I'd also look at Marley's message here, because Marley's message is not a scary message. Marley's message is literally stop being greedy, but the fact Scrooge is so scared of that message and finds it deaf cold, well, that shows how deeply entrenched his principles of greed are. This is not going to be an easy thing to fix. It's going to need a lot of fear and a lot of terror to bash it out of him. And look, he also is calling his dead mate, his mate that he's so fond of that it's broken him as a man. And he calls Marley it's deaf cold eyes, but it's Marley. So the fact Scrooge is we can't say he's dehumanizing a ghost because the ghost isn't human. But we can say that Scrooge is attempting to detach emotion and feeling from the ghost because he's trying in his own way to manage his fear. Obviously, though, as we see, him trying to manage his fear is futile, it's pointless, and in fact it's actually more dangerous for him because he needs to use that fear to become a better person. Right, then let's jump to the end of our little novel, and we're going to talk about the ghost of Christmas future, and he appears slowly, gravely, silently, like mist. So what would I say about that? Well, first of all, we're not going to talk about it in depth. We've got the weather again. Now we've got some mist. So exactly what we were saying previously about the weather being a constant, fear being constant, weather unpredictable, fears unpredictable. We say exactly the same again here. But we can also look at that slow, grave, silent thing. Well, that ghost of Christmas future symbolises Scrooge's death. And we've talked about that previously, about the ghost of Christmas future. It is a representation of Scrooge's death. And it is that ghost that terrifies Scrooge most of all. So it is his death in which he finds the greatest fear. Not, oh my goodness, what's happened to Tiny Tim. Not, oh my goodness, what's happened to Belle. Not, oh, remember old Fezziwig. The thing that terrifies him, the thing that makes the greatest change is his own death. Now, I'll talk about a few language points here. First of all, silently. This ghost has got no sound. It's got no identity. We don't know anything about his face or what he looks like. And that lack of identity reflects how the future is unknown. Now that's wonderful because we've got a chance to shape and change our future. But as I was saying earlier, the unknown absolutely terrifies us. And the fact that there's so many unknowns around this ghost really, really, really scares Scrooge. I then look at mist. Again, this idea of the unknown being scary is reflected in mist. Mist and the use of that pathetic fallacy is hiding things away, it's concealing things. We can't see clearly when we're in the mist. So again, the unknown makes us scared. And then we also look at this heavy comma use: slowly, pause, gravely, pause, silently. It makes it really slow. Now, if you think about that, you think about an interaction with a teacher maybe, that if you think about an interaction with a teacher and you're in trouble, a teacher will use quite heavy pauses to kind of put the onus on you. Those pauses are really intimidating and they're really unnerving because it's up to you to fill the silence, it's up to you to fill the space. And that's how Scrooge now feels, those long periods of silence. The only person who can talk is Scrooge. The only person who can fill them is Scrooge. So he becomes more afraid and becomes more worried now that it's his responsibility to act upon it. And the final one I'll be talking about is this one here, when he's looking at his dead body. It says he's pointing to one overrun by grass and weeds. So this is the moment, this is the epiphany really for Scrooge. This is when his fear bears fruit in that it makes him into a better person. First of all, we've got this cyclical structure of both the stave and the story. So in this stave, we started looking at Scrooge's dead body, and now at the end of this stave, we're looking at Scrooge's dead body. But if you remember as well, the first quote I talked about here in this essay was his deaf, cold eyes, and that idea of deaf and cold was Jacob Marley at the start, but he's also now dead and cold at the end. So we've got a cyclical structure, and that reflects the unbreakable cycle of our life, which results in death. And Scrooge is never going to be able to break free from the consequences of that. And that absolutely terrifies him. I would also look at how this shows the necessity of this fear, though, because if fear is needed at the start and fear is needed at the end, well, it's only through that experience of fear that it's made Scrooge change. And this is the key part of this paragraph. Our other paragraphs have showed Scrooge is scared, Scrooge is scared, Scrooge is scared. This one is Scrooge is scared, and this is the positive impact of it. In that fear, we also see that word, that proper noun one. Now, all the things that define him as a human, his kindness, warmth, friendship, Scrooge didn't have any of them. So now he's died, he's got no legacy, he's got no identity, he's just been easily forgotten, he's just one of the crowd of dead people underneath the ground. And it is that realisation that makes Scrooge change. And finally, I'll be dropping in this one here about grass and weeds, because I think that symbol of weeds is a really nice one to analyse. Weeds are unwanted, they're ugly, they're rejected. You see a weed in your garden, you want to kill it straight away. So Scrooge's legacy, literally from his dead body, his legacy is of greed and selfishness is growing an ugliness on our society. And our society will keep being greedy and keep being selfish because weeds just come back and again and again and again and again. So that's what I'd say about Scrooge's fear. Hope it was helpful. Thanks. Bye bye.